What is up, everybody, and welcome back to the Triple H podcast, Happy Hour Hoops, your one-stop shop for enjoying a cold beverage, listening to our ice-cold basketball takes. We got you covered on everything NBA all the time. We have a special episode of the podcast today. A special guest, Amari McPherson, joining us, a Cleveland Cavaliers fan, writer, everything in between. Amari, good to have you. How you doing today, man?
I'm doing good. How are you guys doing?
Great. Ready to talk some
Great.
hoops, aren't we, Jake?
Yes, sir. I need a soundboard. I really wanted a soundboard for this podcast. It's only up to me, but so just pretend that you heard a big ovation soundboard there, Amari.
Yes.
We were so thrilled. We've been talking about this for a while.
It was already in my head anyway.
Yeah,
exactly. You knew it was exactly. You knew we're all on the same page here. So let's start with the big stories of the day before we get into our topics. First one, Zion showing improvement. Dunny put right in our notes here, allegedly, because can we really believe anything from the Zion Pelicans camp right now? He's slowly progressing to basketball activity. So I'll start with our guest, Amari. Amari, does that mean anything to you at all, really? Like, does this news mean anything to you, or is it just kind of a PR spin for Zion?
It could definitely be a PR spin. And to me, it means nothing. Because unless we hear it from his mouth, unless we hear from the horse's mouth, is anybody really going to believe it? You know, it conveniently came out that he finally got in contact with CJ McCollum after CJ McCollum said that he hadn't talked to him. So it could definitely be a PR spin. So until we hear anything from him, whether it's a press conference, whether it's Twitter, whatever the case may be, I just take everything with a grain of salt for now.
Yeah, I feel like we're almost at the point of this Zion injury is kind of where we were like months ago with Ben Simmons and his return, or when his stuff was going to get worked out. Obviously different situations, but semi-similar in the fact that, you know, everyone from Shams to Woj to team personnel is tweeting about, you know, how close he is to a return. But like, you know, like Amari said, we haven't actually heard or seen really much from Zion. So, you know, putting it in the news section, but kind of just glossing over it at this point until we actually see Zion making some basketball progress.
We do have to note it. I mean, we do, because it's like the way that he left last year, being this looking like the unstoppable force he was for that little stretch. Like it's still there, and this team is like, the Pelicans are not bad. Like if they had Zion on this team, they'd be terrifying. In 2K, if you sim a season right now, the Pelicans are the 1 seed at every single time. I promise you. I started like mad 2K seasons recently. The Pelicans are always nasty. Zion is literally like, what he showed last year is why we're still putting this at the top of this show, because the talent and the potential to be the dominant force in this league is clearly there. And it's crazy that at the beginning of the year they said they were going to reevaluate in 2 weeks, and we all were like, nah, that's not what it's gonna be, and it has not turned out that way at all. So let's talk about somebody coming back from injury. That's very exciting. Kevin Durant back tomorrow. Brooklyn, Miami. Honestly, tomorrow night is like a crazy huge slate of games. Donnie, you got Ja coming to visit in Boston. We've got Miami and Milwaukee. We've got the Battle of Los Angeles, and we'll get into the Lakers in a second here. But Amari, what do you think about Kevin Durant coming back? How do you think he's going to look? Obviously, it's probably going to be a huge impact, this Kevin Durant coming back, but just seeing him with this kind of new look group, sans Ben Simmons.
Yeah, I mean, that's your best player. So that's what they've been waiting for, especially after this Ben Simmons trade. Obviously, we're waiting for Ben Simmons to come back. But as the best player on that team, you know, they fell to the 8th seed. So now they're looking to crawl their way out of the play-in tournament, you know, section of the standings, which I believe they're only 4.5 games out of the 6th seed. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, once KD comes back, and obviously you've got Kyrie for at least the road games, you know what I mean? So even without Ben Simmons, I expect them to make some type of improvement. And then we'll just have to see what Ben Simmons does when he comes back, which, I mean, I have my own doubts and thoughts about that trade and how he'll look in the Nets uniform. But, you know, with KD coming back, that'll obviously be huge for Brooklyn, because, I mean, that's your best player. That's your number one option. So, I mean, you can only go up right now, technically.
That's true. Yeah. And I would love to hear your thoughts more on Kevin Durant trade later on in this podcast when we get to the rest of the East. But Dunny, what were you going to chime in with there?
No, I was just I feel like for me, I'm expecting the type of Kevin Durant that we saw in last year's playoffs,
Mm.
like almost angry, like kind of depleted roster still. Obviously, he's waiting for Ben to come back, but I feel like at this point in Kevin's career, he's just, he's in go mode, like especially now. Um, 8 seed, as Amari just mentioned, they have to climb. I don't think Brooklyn's a team that's going to want to be in the play-in tournament. Obviously, I don't think anyone would be worried if they're in that situation, but they're good enough where they shouldn't even be there. And I think that's what's going to be on Durant's mind. It's going to be go mode for him. He's going to play with Kyrie if he can, and if Kyrie's not there, I don't think that's really going to slow him down. And then same thing with Ben. I think, when he's there, he's there. And until then, this is going to be his team. And we're going to see some KD takeover like last year in the offs.
Well, December 31st, the Nets were the 1 seed in the East. So you can see like just the impact and the drop off they've had is crazy. They were 5-17 without Durant. I mean, that's one of the worst teams in the league. So
yeah,
the impact cannot be understated on what he's going to do for this team. And we'll see if the roster's better fit around them or not. We'll get into that later. Before we get into the Cavs, obviously, before you talk about the Cavs, you got to talk about LeBron James. So last night and going into today, I saw some crazy LeBron James takes, like some crazy stuff. I'm sure we all saw it. So, Amari, is it warranted? Is this LeBron slander the way this Lakers team has looked? Last night was a bad loss. Lucas switching on to him to get buckets. It's not a good look. What do you think of this Lakers situation and just LeBron's role in it in general?
I think if you take LeBron's role in how the team looks, then yeah, some of the slander is warranted. But some of the stuff that's come out within the past 2 days, I would think that is not really all that warranted. But I think it also speaks to how good he is. He's 37 years old, averaging 29 points a game. Who really expects a 37-year-old LeBron to carry a team anymore? He shouldn't have to at 37. But yet here we are still talking about, well, can LeBron do it, or or he can't do it, So is some of the slander warranted? Yeah, some of it, but I think mostly no, because I mean he plays a team sport, but at the same time, as one of five, he's doing his part to try to get the Lakers these wins. And they're 7 games under 500 right now, and even last night, they were in it. They made a nice comeback after being down over 20 points, but ultimately they lost. And the thing with LeBron and his defense, with Lucas switching on to LeBron with defense, calling an ISO, he's calling them out and he's scoring. It worked and they won. But we all know for the past several years, LeBron really doesn't care about defense, especially not in a regular season game in early March. So it's kind of 6 in one hand, half a dozen in the other. Some of it warranted, some of it not. I mean, it just depends on which lens you look through it through.
Yeah, I mean, I'm with you completely, because I passive aggressively tweeted out today just the stat line to LeBron. I was like, listen, I don't need to hear any of this. Like, the guy, like you said, he's doing his part. He's doing more than his part. Like, he still has one of the highest PERs in the NBA. He's averaging 28 points a game, which he was not close to the last couple of years of the Lakers. He was more around 25, 26. So he's doing his part scoring. But I think the point that you made is that he shouldn't have to be doing this at 37. That's the thing. It's supposed to be Anthony Davis who is really carrying this team. And I think that's the biggest thing my biggest thing about people are like the hot take culture and everything else that Twitter has started, especially when it comes to basketball talk, is when injuries are happening on a team, like no one wants to talk about them. They're just ready to jump in a row. Even if it's like an AD is a major injury, so that's a glaring weakness. But even just an important rotation player, important starter, if those guys are missing, you get so many takes that are just on the current state of that team rather than like, all right, but like the Bulls right now, like we'll get into them later with that Miami game that happened over the other weekend. They didn't have Lonzo or Caruso. Like, that's their defensive identity. Like, that is their identity. So, like, I think that we got to just give more thing to that. This is on AD. AD's play when he was healthy and the fact that he hasn't been able to be healthy. What do you think, Donnie?
Yeah, I mean, I agree with a lot of what you guys are saying. I think it's you can't really take the slander of the Lakers on Twitter. Like, you can't take it all too seriously because, of course, some of it is just outrageous. And I don't think, any basketball fan with an actual brain, understands Bron's greatness. I think it's more just the fact of like the body language of the team this year for me. I think coming into this year, we kind of thought that it would be such a unified group just because, LeBron brought in Carmelo and, how close those two are. And then obviously Davis and LeBron have a real connection. We saw them win a championship together already. Russ, it seemed like, they were going to be a powerhouse with that big three. And you have Russell Westbrook still having bad nights like last night. And then just kind of coming out and saying that he needs to play better. Well, we're in March and you guys are in the play-in spot right now. Like you don't really have time to be saying that you have to play better. It kind of just needs to improve on its own. So yeah, I mean, do I think that all the criticism to LeBron is fair? No, but I think they're in a scary spot. If I was a Lakers fan, I would legitimately be worried right now because much like Kevin Durant and the Nets, we said they're in the play-in spot. I'm not worried if KD is in a play-in game. I think he's getting out of that easily. The way this Lakers team looks right now, I don't know if I can say the same thing about them. Obviously they only have to win one game if they find themselves in the play-in, but it doesn't even look like that's something they can accomplish right now.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. And LeBron, it feels like sports karma with LeBron making fun of the play-in last year a little bit, and the fact that they have to rely on the play-in this year.
That would be awful.
But there's some juicy potential first-round matchups. The Lakers are in the 7 or 8 seed with Phoenix, Golden State, or Memphis that you could sign me up for. And all three of those teams, they don't want to see the Lakers. They don't want to see LeBron James and a potentially healthy Anthony Davis in the first round. That's not what I would think. All right, let's get into it. We're here. The good stuff. The Eastern Conference is here. And yes, the Cleveland Cavaliers. The big news tonight, and I think was what our main thing was going to be that we talked about here, is the guard position. Darius Garland's back tonight versus Charlotte. When this is live, the game will have already been underway. So this is kind of like future telling. We could be like, we're in the future here at the same time as Darius Garland's return. Amari, I don't know about you. I understood why Darius played. He did all the All-Star weekend stuff, did All-Star Saturday night, played in the game, and then wasn't playing for the first couple of games back. I understood why it was necessary for him to do all the stuff on All-Star weekend. It was a great showcase for the franchise and the team, and obviously just for him, like a great moment to enjoy, but was a little frustrated that he hadn't been back yet. Now he's coming back. I think this is one of the things too, is that this is easily the most important stretch they have this season, especially with getting Garland back. Charlotte tonight, Philly on Friday night, next weekend, a back-to-back road series with the Bulls and the Heat. I mean, these are some big games coming up for the Cavs. So with Garland coming back, potentially LeVert for that stretch run, I guess just your overall feeling about the Cavs kind of and what we should expect from Garland coming back and just what we should expect from them coming up against this elite competition that they're going to have to be facing.
Yeah, the stretch is definitely rough. I think overall, if you look at it through the lens of not really having high expectations coming into the season, coming off of multiple losing seasons coming into the season, then not that you're not worried, but to this point, you could also say that the Cavs have overachieved to this point. So yes, it's unfortunate that we have these injuries that are building up and we're really guard depleted. But I mean, you would like to see the team fully healthy to see how they look against these top teams in the East, because right now they're the 5th seed. So hypothetically, you're going to be facing some of these teams in the playoffs, depending on how far you go. So you want to see those potential playoff matchups that could come down the road. But I think right now, to be honest, I'm not really worried. And I'm not really worried because it is injuries. So yes, it would be nice to be healthy and see how we look. But you also understand that when you're missing key pieces like Garland and you're already down 2 guards from the beginning of the season, one with a season-ending injury, one of them maybe could come back. We'll see how that goes. It's almost like we're kind of hedging our bets. We lost these people early in the season, but yet we're still doing good. But when we don't do good, we kind of lean back on, well, we are injured. You know what I mean? So yes, it's a rough stretch, and I'm looking forward to see how it goes. I think we can, even if we lose, you could still put up a good fight with the Chicagos, the Miamis, and we've seen how that's gone already earlier this season.
Yeah, sounds like a good challenge at the very least. Like at least this is the circumstances right now. You guys have guys missing, but this is kind of the stretch of the season to see what you're made of. So yeah, I kind of agree with all that for you guys. I know Jake's opinion on this because we've been doing the podcast for a long time. We were live when Mobley got drafted, but I want to hear another Cavs fan's perspective on this. How do we feel about Evan Mobley just in general? So take me through like when he was selected in the draft, if you were excited or were looking for someone else, and then to now, what your thoughts on Evan Mobley are.
Yeah, I'm glad that I was wrong because I actually wanted Jalen Green. Somebody that could be out on the wing, a high level scorer. And like I said, I'm glad I was wrong because we already have Kevin Love. We signed marketing. We got Jared Allen. We're playing really old school basketball. Technically, we got two guards, and then we have these 3 7-footers with another 6'9" guy off of the bench as your sixth man. So, like I said, I'm glad I was wrong because it's definitely worked out. And I know we'll get into him and the rookies a little bit later, but to me, he's definitely been at worst 1B. In as far as rookie rankings this year. I think he's been a really bright spot. He's got some things that he can improve. Obviously, he's only, a teenager. We don't expect him to be, LeBron or Michael Jordan right out of the gate. But like I said, he's been a nice compliment to this team and the way that JB Bickerstaff wants to run the team and his scheme. And I think he's been great for it. On the flip side, if we had Jalen Green, then the injury to Rubio and Sexton might not hurt as much. But like I said, I'm glad I was wrong with having Evan Mobley.
Yeah, I feel like bringing in LeVert was big on like not getting a guy like Jalen Green too. You kind of were able to fill that void elsewhere.
Absolutely.
Yeah, but the biggest thing still remains about LeVert is that like I want to see him on the floor a lot, like that was my biggest worry about them trading for him in the first place is that like he has just not been consistently available for the last couple of years. Some of that not his own doing, obviously, like they saved his life in Indiana when he got traded there. Like that was literally a life-changing trade for him. But just still like that is what this team really, really needs. I was on that I didn't think they'd have the shot at Jalen Green. So I was very to Mobley. I kind of thought but I was very open to that idea. If for some reason Houston was going to take Mobley, I'm with you there because that creator type thing. And I don't know about you, Amari. I had high expectations for Garland. I thought I had higher expectations for him than Sexton coming out, mostly just because of what I heard from like NBA peers. I think we've talked about that a couple of times on this podcast. Like Curry gave him a big cosign before the career and some other guys like that. But I didn't expect this from Garland. I didn't expect the type of playmaker, creator, like just the dynamic guy he is. I'd never expected that.
Yeah, but if we're being honest, a lot of that you can attribute to the fact that Sexton has been out. So we talk about Sexton being a near 25 points per game scorer last year, but it was mainly due to the fact that nobody else could really score that much. So even though we were losing, at least he was doing his job at scoring. And when we win, it was because of him and his scoring, while Darius Garland was the true point guard. Now with Sexton out, Darius Garland, now that we know that he has that in him, he can score, he can give you a double-double. He can score 25 and give you 12 assists if he needs to. And it's been great. But at the same time, because of these injuries, we're relying on it too much. And so as we've seen with him out of the game, the offense just comes to a complete stop. The ball rotation, the off-ball movement is terrible. And, the playmaking is obviously suffers when he's off of the floor. So, we can see how valuable he is when he's off of the floor. And it's great that we have that. But at the same time, we need someone else to kind of fill that void when he's not on the floor. Or at least when he is on the floor, at least he doesn't have to do it all the time, because every time he comes down, the ball is in his hands and he's either going to shoot a three, which he's good at doing, or throw a lob to Jared Allen. And when those two aren't there, then what?
Yeah. And the thing about them too, and it's funny you mentioned it, I think a couple minutes ago, about JB really likes this team. Like this is an old school team. This is like a 90s team. The way they're built when they added Mobley, everything. And without Garland and LeVert, the last 3 games after the All-Star break, it feels like I'm watching early 1990s basketball. Like the Cavs, like the strategy the last 2 games is basically let's get to the last like 6 minutes and then we will just choke this team out and hope for the best. And it worked. Like they got wins. And that's the thing is JB, he can do whatever he needs to do with the personnel and get the most out of them. But this team is built for rock fights. They're not built for shootouts like that. Yeah, I think I think seeing LeVert and Garland, we haven't really seen them together at all yet. So maybe they can be built for shootouts. We know LeVert. We know what LeVert can do scoring the ball in spurts, at least at times. We know what Garland can do. Obviously, we just touched on that. And just having those two on the floor just makes we had the other night. It was Seti and Love who really came on hot in the second half. But those guys are both consistently all year have just been super streaky. I mean, Chetty's whole career is just like he could shoot 0 for 9 or be 9 for 9. Like it literally, there could be no in between with that guy.
Or he'll do it in the same game. First half will go 0 for 9, and then the second half he'll be 8 for 9 with 20 points.
It's the most maddening thing in the world. So it's like the depth is there. Like it just depends on the night. Like if those guys are going to pull it through or not. So you touched on Sexton a little bit. Then let's look ahead to past the season because that's the biggest thing coming for the Cavs in the offseason is the Sexton decision. What's your ideal Sexton scenario after the season for the Cavs?
My ideal situation is to bring him back. I think you can still win with him as a starter. Obviously the scoring load won't be as much on him as it was in the past, and that's a great thing. It also depends on what we do with Caris LeVert. Are we going to extend him? If we do, is he going to come off the bench or is he going to start over Isaac Okoro? We just don't know. A lot of people are a little bit weary because he signed with Clutch Sports, so now you think he's going to try to arm his way out, of Cleveland and try to garner a big contract somewhere else. Again, we don't know. It's been tough because of the small sample size that we have of Sexton this year. The numbers haven't been great. So, yes, he scored 25 points a game last year, but this year he was really struggling before he got hurt. And so we just don't know what this team looks like when it's fully healthy. But for me, I think you can still win with Sexton as, you're starting 2 guard and just leave the decision-making to Garland, let him shoot his threes. Maybe they don't need to both be 20-point, scorers. They can both be, 15 and 18 with, 8 assists or so. And as long as you have other guys that can score, which we have Jared Allen, who is one of the leaders in double-doubles. You have Kevin Love, who is the 4th highest bench scorer in the league right now. And like
That's crazy.
I said, we'll see with Caris LeVert, who before coming over to Cleveland was averaging 18 points per game. So obviously all of that will change depending on how the roster looks and how, the offense flows. But I think you have the pieces in-house already to have a playoff contending team next year. It just depends on how they use them.
I'm with you on keeping Sexton. I've been that the whole way, just as anything, just to keep the asset. And if the worst thing comes to worst, they have LeVert next year. They'd have Sexton next. I don't think any team's offering, like, the worry about him signing with Clutch doesn't bother me as much because I don't know what team is coming out and offering him the max this offseason or anything like that. Like, I just don't see that scenario happening. But you sign him, you keep him, and then next year you have LeVert or him. If it's not working out or somebody needs to get moved, at least you can get something back for him. I don't think that they should let that go for nothing.
Yeah.
What about you? Go ahead.
No, I was just gonna ask the both of you guys, because obviously playoff team this year for the Cavaliers. A couple bumps in the road as of late with injuries. Already have a few guys, out for season. Sexton may be able to make a return. I gotta ask both the Cavs fans here. What's your guys' ceiling on this Cavs fan this season? Like how far do you think this team can go? Is Garland and Mobley enough to make a push? What are the thoughts like for the Cleveland fans?
Yeah, I think the ceiling for the Cavs this year is second round. Obviously, with the injuries, we'll see how they finish towards the end of the year. But I think, especially if they finish with a top 4 seed, they can win the first round, having home court advantage, and then obviously they'll face like maybe a Milwaukee or somebody like that in the second round, and well that'll be it. But I think this year they can definitely not alone make the playoffs, they're already in playoff contention, but also win a playoff series. So I think that's kind of the ceiling that I'm looking at right now. Obviously the injuries, we need to tighten up our defense. We were one of the top defensive teams and the top Eastern Conference defensive team for much of the season. So, a lot of that will depend on health and who's available. But also, I don't want to sound like, oh, we're just happy to be here. But the cliche goes, you need to get there in order to, see what it's like to win. And, so we need to do that because we don't have a lot of playoff experience. And then once they get there, they can build upon that. But right now, I like a first round victory.
The interesting thing is Kobe Altman kind of set those expectations today in that his presser. He was like, hopefully we don't slip down the stretch. We can keep in contention. Just trying, like he's been really good about trying to stay ahead of all that stuff. Whether you agree, I don't know how I feel. I've never seen a GM do it. Whatever, it's one thing or another. But he said it, and that's kind of where I think we're at. I'm completely aligned with you though. I think winning round one would be the ceiling. I don't think that they are the elite of the elite and like in those round two matchups, if they get into a matchup with Philly or Brooklyn, basically, I don't think any team's really going to have a shot. That's kind of where I'm coming around to in the East, but I don't know about that for sure. But just, I think matchup dependent, the first round, there are matchups that they can win. And the thing about this team too, is no matter what in any game, they're not going to go down without swinging. Like this team grinds to the end of every game, and that's what you need from in a playoff team, especially a team looking in their first playoff experience. We've seen those teams have success in the past, young teams that don't know any better, that go out and just play hard every night. Like they're gonna piss some people off in the playoffs with that kind of thing. I think my favorite matchup is Chicago, just because I don't like Chicago defensively at all, and I think I think really when I'm looking at it is teams that the Cavs could score on. Like that would be the best matchup possible, because if they play a defensive juggernaut, like your Boston Celtics, apparently the best defensive team in NBA history at this point, they could have some trouble with that. But that's what I'm looking at is matchup dependent. Like honestly, I kind of like a Miami matchup on paper, but saying that, Miami still just terrifies me because they're just Miami. Like we can get into
another level in the offs.
Yeah, they're just different. Bam is kind of terrifying. I haven't watched Miami game in a little while, and I watched that full game against Chicago, and he really just controlled let's get into the rest of the East here. Let's go into it. Let's go. We'll start out with the top of this here with the Bucks and the Sixers. The Bucks are the defending champs. Amari, should we be doubting the Bucks at all? Like, is this still the Bucks conference and everybody else with Giannis and everything? Like, we've gone through this whole thing of doubting Giannis before, and he kind of proved it wrong last year. And it feels like we're kind of back around to where we were before the finals last year.
Yeah, I am certainly not doubting the Bucks. I mean, they still have the pieces. I mean, who did they really lose last year? You know what I mean? And like you said, Giannis definitely proved us wrong, and they're still one of the top teams in the Eastern Conference. I say all that to say, I know we'll get into it, but Philadelphia, Miami, I mean, those guys are going to be tough, try to coming out of the East. But as far as Milwaukee goes, I'm not doubting them. If you were to ask me to pick them on the field, I'd have to think about it, to be honest. But to answer the question, no, I'm not doubting them. I don't think they're going to be a second round exit. I think they'll be right in the thick of things once, the finals come around.
Okay. What about you, Dunny?
Yeah, I mean, definitely not doubting them. I think, both ways. The last like 3-4 years or so, I think Milwaukee's regular season is not telling of what they do in the playoffs, because before they had this championship roster, they were unbelievable in the regular season. With Coach Bud leading them and the 3-point shooting that they put on display, and that was kind of on the rise for Giannis. Before he really reached super star level. And then, last year and this year, they're not, far away in the Eastern Conference, the number one. They're not even the number one seed right now. But that doesn't mean that we should, take this regular season and just think that they're going to be a first or second round exit in the playoffs, because, they're not crushing teams every night on the hardwood. So yeah, I think, we take this regular season. They've been dealing with injuries of their own, but kind of like what Amari said, they didn't lose really too many assets from the championship roster last year. They brought in a few shooters. Bobby Portis is playing out of his mind this year. So yeah, I mean, everyone, talking about the Sixers and the Nets on the rise, and even my Celtics and Miami, at the top of the East. Let's not forget about the defending champs, because come playoff time, Giannis is going to let us know, I think.
Yeah, no, there's no the reason I'm still giving all this credence to the Bucks is because of Giannis. Like, it's the ultimate respect. The thing that worries me about this Milwaukee team, I'm looking at just the simple points per game stats in the East right now, and defensive points per game among the top 6 opponents' points per game, I should say. So defensively, Chicago and Milwaukee are both at 110 opponent points per game. Every other East contender is at least 4 points under that. Sixers 106 opponent points per game, Miami 104.7, Cleveland 102.7, and Boston 103.8. So there's been some sort of drop off among that defense this year, at least in the regular season. Now that's the thing, regular season. Like, this is a team that won the title last year. We've seen this happen with so many title teams where they kind of coast through the regular season. They're still off the high. They have the hangover at the beginning of the year, all that stuff. I think all that very much still in play for the Bucks, but just something to note. Defensively is where, if there's a slip defensively in their playoff play with the way the East is this year, it could be that could be their Achilles heel. But let's get into it. Amari, you said it earlier. You brought it up yourself. So now we did this last week, but I need to hear your official position on the Simmons Harden trade and how you think the fit is. So both for Brooklyn and we were going to talk about Harden and Embiid. So if you want to touch on that, and then we can jump off of that too. But I'd love to hear your thought about Simmons and the Nets too, because you brought it up earlier yourself.
Yeah, I think if you look at it from a standpoint of like right now, this season, then I think the Sixers won the trade. But I think if you look at the future, I think the Nets won the trade. And I'll start with the Nets because they did get, a lot of people want to talk about draft picks and whether you should trade them, whether you shouldn't trade them. There's only 2 rounds in the NBA. I mean, Draymond Green was a 2nd round pick. You know what I mean? So you just don't know who you'll find. Kawhi Leonard was a number 15 pick. So it doesn't have to be a 1 or a 2. But, they got, defense in the paint with Drummond. They got a shooter in Seth Curry, who's actually shooting higher than his brother. And I believe last year he finished higher than his brother as well. I mean, we can talk about Ben Simmons and his lack of offense all we want, but he's an all NBA level defensive point guard with his height. So I think they won going down the stretch. But I think right now, definitely Philadelphia won the trade, because you look at, we've seen the 2 games that they've played so far after the trade. Yes, it's been against some low-level teams, but they've looked really dominant in those 2 games. And, foul trouble, we talk about that, against the Knicks from Sunday's game, and they play again tonight, I believe. If you can't stop those guys from going to the free throw line, then you have no chance. Because we saw Embiid, even as a big, is shooting a high percentage at the free throw line, which kind of goes against the grain from other, centers and power forwards. But James Harden, one of the best offensive creators in the game right now, and obviously he can get to the free throw line with the best of them. And it almost looks like he shed 20 pounds overnight again.
He did. He had to. And got him on that juice cleanse or something.
I need to know what his workout plan is. But I mean, just he looks completely rejuvenated now that he's out of Brooklyn. And they've got guys that, Maxey, Thibault, and, just pick your poison. So Philadelphia, I think I wouldn't be surprised if Philadelphia comes out of the East this year. Me neither. And back to Brooklyn, if I can touch on them really quickly, the problem that I see with Brooklyn is that all 3 of those guys need the ball in their hands. Ben Simmons, yes, he'll be a playmaker, but you can't make plays without the ball in your hand. And whether they haven't needed to or whether they can't, we haven't seen Kyrie and KD play off ball. They need the ball in their hands because they're 2 top-level scorers. So, with one ball going around, I just don't know how that offense will look. You know what I mean? Whether it'll be, okay, it's my turn. Okay, now it's your turn. But what about Ben Simmons? It's not like he can stand up in the corner and shoot a 3 if he needed to.
True.
I mean, it can really go either way. But as far as this season, yeah, I think Philadelphia won the trade. I think it was a win-win. Technically, you don't get a lot of
me too.
win-win trades. I mean, Simmons finally gets out of Philadelphia, but as far as this season, I would definitely say Philadelphia won the trade. They look like the better team.
So I share your concern. Touching on the Nets, I share your concern about Simmons' fit with some of the lineups, especially like if it's a Drummond, if it's Simmons, Durant, and a big out there. I'm very concerned about the spacing. It was my biggest thing on this podcast for the last 2 years to just complain about Philly and just complain about the fact that Simmons and Embiid just should not be next to each other. I just never believed that Simmons, in my mind, is a center in the modern NBA. Like, honestly, I feel like that's where he's not a perfect mold for that either. I don't think he's a perfect mold for anything, but I think defensively and just where you need him offensively, that kind of works. So I like the idea of the spacing around him where he's kind of the guy down low doesn't really bother me as much. But defensively, I think is where you're lacking with that lineup, because if you're playing Philadelphia, what, Ben's going to guard Joel? Like, have fun. Joel's literally he's going to make that a point to make his life hell. Like, that's the dudes they're dealing with. Is he going to guard Giannis and whatever other big they come out with? Like, that's the Nets' biggest thing is like their best lineup. I don't think can hold up defensively with the Bucks or the Sixers, just the way that those two teams are built. And then if you go and you put Drummond in or put another big in, you're kind of handicapping yourself offensively. But mind you, I mean, KD and Kyrie, maybe they're just those guys and it doesn't matter too. So I'm with, like, the Nets are just, I think the Sixers are better too. I think I've come back around. I was on the fact that I thought the Nets were going to be the better overall team, but after seeing the first couple of games of Harden and
it's ridiculous, man.
Yeah, it is. And so what do you think, Dunny? Like, where are your thoughts at just all of this all-encompassing conversation about this trade?
Yeah, I mean, to start with Philly, the Sunday game was the most telling for me. The 27 free throw attempts for Embiid. I think Harden had like 10 or maybe even more of his own. And I don't know. I didn't even think Philly played particularly well that game, but just like honing in on Embiid and Harden was just absolutely ridiculous to watch. And they've done it, in almost every game they've played together so far. It looks so effortless for them. And I think, I mean, real quick, just to get what you guys think, this has to be the best duo in the NBA right now, right?
Yeah.
The only other ones that come to mind are KD and Kyrie, and then Braun and AD, maybe
if they were healthy.
Yeah, PG and Kawhi I think could put up a fight, but they're both injured, obviously. I mean, they literally, not only do they bring in a guy like Harden, they just assembled the best duo in the NBA overnight. And then I love that Amari brought up a guy like Maxey, because Maxey looks infinitely better the minute James Harden steps in the door. I don't know if they're working closely together at practice or if playing with a guy like James Harden just makes it that much easier. But I've watched the Sixers more closely since Harden's been there, and Maxey just looks like a completely different player to me. So,
yeah,
I mean, not only is
Maxey's been awesome this year in general, but I think Harden opens up a lot for him because Maxey just wants to hit. Tyrese Maxey's his mindset is, I just want to dunk on everybody. Like, that's that kid. It's been like that since college. So it really opens up a lot for him with Harden. But continue, Donnie. I'm sorry.
No, you're good. Yeah, so I mean, that's where I'm at with Philly. Like, for sure, scary. And then, Brooklyn, I think we're just gonna have to wait and see. I kind of agree with you that they do have some flaws in their defense still. It's something we're gonna have to see, but kind of like going full circle here, what I said about Westbrook at the beginning of the season and the Lakers saying, oh, we need to play better. It's kind of similar with the Brooklyn Nets right now. It's like we need our whole team to play together, but you're running out of time. Like, it's, in March, soon enough it'll be June. Playoffs are starting. Our playoffs are underway. They obviously, it's kind of out of Kyrie and the Nets' hands of, the whole mask mandate and all that stuff that's going on in New York. But, I saw a report yesterday that Simmons is still week to week. So really hard to evaluate the Nets, and also must just be really hard to be a Nets fan or part of the organization, or if you're Kevin Durant coming back and not knowing when your co-stars are coming back. So right now it's easy for me to have Philly like way ahead of Brooklyn. One, just on paper, and two, how things have panned out since the trade's been made.
Yeah. KD's probably gonna come out tomorrow and he's gonna put up like 48, and we're just all gonna be like, oh, we should have just believed KD. All right. So we got a couple more teams to touch on in the East here. So before we let Dunny comment on this, Amari, you're getting this one first. Right now, the second most likely team to win the title from the Eastern Conference, according to my favorite website, basketballreference.com, is the Boston Celtics. I just want to know what you think about that.
Yeah, I also love that website. I use it for just about every sport I write on. That's definitely surprising to me because, I mean, the way they came out, they had their struggles. They had some injuries, obviously. But even though I'm not a Celtics fan, I'm kind of glad that they're in the mix. You know what I mean? I feel like the NBA is better when Boston is good, and we've seen them make that rise to the standings, while at the same time Brooklyn fell. So I think it makes for a compelling storyline because I think a lot of people right now, including myself, aren't counting the Celtics out, and I don't think we should be. I think they'll be right there in the mix along with Philadelphia, along with we'll see what Brooklyn does. Second most likely to win the title, that, like I said, that surprises me. I won't challenge Basketball Reference because I do like to use them. I use them often. I don't want them to block my IP address. But it does surprise me. But at the same time, I don't hate it. I am glad to see that they're doing much better than they were during their first year with the new coach. So yeah, I'm happy. I'm happy.
All right, that was more of a glowing.
Yeah, might need to clip that.
Donnie's just gonna save that one from Amari for himself.
Don't expect it all the no.
The first team ahead of them is Miami. So I think the things, Donnie, we can take away from it is that this model, especially, but all these kind of internet, like 538 had the same thing as the Celtics as the most likely. They're really favoring the Celtics defense, and obviously the defensive turnaround. We talked about it last week too. It's been outstanding, and all you had to do was watch. You posted it today on Twitter, the Marcus Smart save. You really just had to watch like 5 minutes of that fourth quarter to realize what this defense has been doing. It was fucking crazy last night. Like they're animals. They switch everything. They're aggressive. They're getting steals. And this team is built for transition basketball. Like Derek White's a great point guard in the open floor. You got Tatum and Brown, who just are deadly in transition and in the half court. That was the first Celtics game I've watched in a couple weeks, Donnie, and I was really impressed last week, especially by the defense. So how are you like? We're not even close to the panic button anymore. A couple weeks ago, Mari,
I threw it away.
In December, we were on the panic button. We was like, I'm not touching it, but it's right there. Now where are we? What are we thinking about? Just seeding wise, like matchups, what overall Celtics thought?
So starting with the panic button, I threw it in the trash. It's somewhere at a local dump, and I replaced it with one of those buttons from Staple, that was easy button, and I just smack that thing every time we win now. No, not to be too cocky, but I like that you brought up the second half of last night because the Atlanta Hawks was one of the top 5 offenses probably in the NBA right now. They hung 60 plus on the Celtics in the first half. And then in the second half, the Celtics held them to 33 points. So I think the reasoning, I don't even know if I believe that the Celtics are, whatever it is, the second favorite in the Eastern Conference to win the title. I think it's kind of crazy that teams like the Bucks and the Sixers aren't even in that
the
mix.
Nets were 0.1%. The Nets were 0.1%.
Yeah, I feel like it's just because the 8 seed, and that's kind of what I was getting at. I feel like this might be skewed just because of the way the Celtics have been winning, since it has been with defense, and over the last month and a half, they've had multiple, a handful of 30 point wins. So I think, once you start breaking down numbers and going into the analytics, that is what's going to pop off the sheet. So I think just the way the Celtics have been winning, that's probably why people are taking them, so high for title favorites. But I mean, yeah, dude, as a Celtics fan, I cannot complain right now. I absolutely love the addition of Derek White at the deadline. Wasn't sure how I felt about it at first, but I honestly just didn't know enough about Derek White, the player. He saved us last night in the third quarter. He really got the offense going off the bench.
He really did.
Grant Williams is a dude who last year, people thought he was going to be out of the league, and now he's one of the most efficient bench players in the entire NBA. Third highest 3-point percentage in the entire league. Bullies people on the block now out of nowhere. It's really hard to not love this team, especially how invested they look since the All-Star, or even a little before the All-Star break, and now after the All-Star break. First year head coach, I think they're finally starting to buy in. He's getting all his schemes down. I don't know, man. A lot to love right now. I don't want to get too high, but I'm with Amari where I think it's good for the league that Boston's in the mix this year.
It always is. All right, so let's get in. We got two more teams. The top two teams we haven't even got into, so let's get into them before we get into our East Finals picks and wrap this podcast up. Chicago or Miami, they are both 1-2. They've basically been 1-2, damn near. I mean, we were talking about earlier, the Nets were number one, but Miami and Chicago were right behind them, kind of snuck in there. Miami's not really new to this. They obviously were in the finals a couple years ago. We've got a lot of trust in them. Chicago, brand new to this. We don't know really what to expect from them in the playoffs. They've been the top two teams, two of the top teams all year long. Mari, who do you have more trust in going forward, and really just in the playoffs?
Yeah, I have more trust in Miami. I mean, they have the toughness, they have the defense, they have the grit. I mean, they obviously have the coaching as well. And I mean, once we get in the playoffs, I just don't count out Jimmy Butler. We saw what he did. I mean, he led them to the finals just 2 years ago, and as long as Tyler Hero was hitting his threes, there was talk of him earlier in the year being the sixth man. Obviously, that has died down a bit, but he's still been pretty well. But I trust Miami more. I mean, like you said, Chicago's a fairly new team. We've seen people in and out of the lineup: Caruso, Ball, Levine. So we just don't know what they're going to look like. And but at the same time, to give them their flowers, even though they've been in and out of the lineup, they've still been one of the top two teams in the Eastern Conference. So you really can't count them out. But I trust Miami more going down the stretch. I mean, I believe they're still the 1 seed right now. I saw them play over the weekend. They look really well. They've got Kyle Lowry as an addition, and I mean, he's championship material. He just won a championship in Toronto. So when you have all that under Spoelstra, I definitely trust them more.
What about you, Tony?
His last point is exactly, kind of what wraps it all up for me. Coach Spo, man. Like, he's been there so many times. He's one of the most respected coaches league-wide. And I think even if Chicago had those guys in their lineup year-round, and maybe if they were a little closer than they already are right now in the standings, I think I would still go with Miami just from coaching alone. Obviously, addition to Lowry and the core of this Heat team being in that Bubbles final just a couple of years ago, I think so. A little recency bias, but also the Miami Heat just have a bunch of gamers, and
That's
I think
true.
Probably the best head coach in the NBA right now, in my opinion.
I want to give a shout out to Gabe Vincent really quickly too, because he's kind of been really under the radar for me, but obviously performing really well. So if he can keep that up in the playoffs, yeah, I like that.
Yeah.
He is the typical Heat guy, like the Strus, Duncan in general, like all those guys, those scorers that they have, they're guys that just come out, grind, they get buckets. I was going to bring up Gabe Vincent when I came back around. I'm glad you did, Amari, because he was especially in this game against Chicago the other day, it was really impressive. He was the creator. Like Jimmy was deferring to him on offense to go do things. I'm with you guys. No, I'm going to say I'm with you guys just because of the defensive upside. There was a play Bam made the other night where I think it was Io that tried to do a pick and roll with Vooch and put Bam in it. And first of all, I don't know why you're putting Bam in any pick and rolls ever. But he switched on to Io at the top, realized it afterwards that he was
whoever was going to get blocked.
Yes. And I was like, I watched it like 4 times in a row. I was like, that's the play. That's what is going to happen. That play is going to be stuck in my mind if Miami just keeps moving through people, because Bam's a freak like that. And he's been on a mission all year too. Like he's averaging 18 and 10. He is their engine. He is everything. But I'm going to say Chicago just so anybody in my apartment building hears me, I don't get in trouble. So let's go with the Bulls. The Bulls are going to win the East. Now let's go. Before we get to our East picks and wrap up, any thoughts on any of the playing teams? Trey, LaMelo, the Raptors we haven't touched on, Amari, anything?
Yeah, I'm gonna touch on Charlotte really quickly because as you guys were talking, I was thinking about that ceiling of the Cavs I was talking about. If I'm the Cavs, and even if I have the 4 seed, I'm not sure if I really want to see Charlotte because I think that'll be a really tough out, a really hard fought 7-game series that could really go either way. And they're playing tonight, and even the past couple games that they played earlier this season have really come down to the wire.
Games.
Yeah, really great games. So I'm gonna give my props to Charlotte. As a Cavs fan, I don't know if I really want to see Charlotte in the playoffs.
Dunny, I feel like you agree with that with the Celtics because Celtics and Hornets have had some freaking crazy games the last couple of years too.
Crazy games recently, and just the fact that Rozier is there, dude, and just cooks us every single time he plays us. And how they signed Isaiah Thomas to a 10-day, dude, and we have them coming up. I feel like there's going to be a 60 points combined from Rozier and Thomas honestly, next time we see them.
We're going to pass it back and forth, 30 and 30 the whole night.
Yeah. And LaMelo has been cooking the Celtics like every time he plays us now. That'll happen, though. He does that to everyone, I guess.
Yeah, he does that. All right.
But yeah, so I think out of those two teams, I would definitely be more worried about Charlotte if we're talking Charlotte and Atlanta.
Oh yeah, I'm with Charlotte all the way. I'm not a big Atlanta person. I mean, the city, yeah, fine. The Hawks, though, I'm not a big Hawks guy in general. And then the Raptors are going to take some team to 6 games no matter what in the first round. I don't care who it is. It's going to go 6 games. It's going to be an annoying series. And we'll give them their props after that. Amari, as we wrap up, your Eastern Conference Finals matchup. We won't ask you NBA Finals. We usually do that. We'll leave you off of that for now. Next time your NBA Finals, though. East Finals, though. What do you think right now, today, March 2nd, at 7:20 Eastern Time?
Right now, I'm gonna go Milwaukee and Philadelphia.
Okay.
Yeah. And do I pick a winner or?
If you want to pick a winner, go for it.
See, that's tough because I don't want to count out Milwaukee. They've got the experience, and Philadelphia, like we said, has only been 2 games, but they look so good right now. And it looks like Harden and Embiid both look rejuvenated, and Embiid was already having an MVP type season. But I just can't count Giannis out of the playoffs. In the playoffs, I mean, putting up 50 points in the finals clinching, game. So if I had to pick, I guess I would go Milwaukee, in 7.
Okay. I can't argue with that. I mean, that's the Giannis effect. I think it comes down to a game 7 with Milwaukee and Philly. I would be leading towards, I'd probably bet a lot on Milwaukee, honestly. When it comes to James Harden in a game 7, I'm taking the other team. Dunny, who you got for the East Conference?
I am going Miami and Milwaukee.
Okay. Oh, man. These two would try to kill each other if that was the East.
Yeah.
Oh my god.
I think they're actually playing tonight, right?
They are. That's true. A little bit.
So hopefully we'll see, a little preview of the Eastern Conference Finals. I don't know. I think Giannis is going to will them to that spot, and I think Miami is really just operating and clicking on all cylinders. I think, Jimmy probably has a sour taste in his mouth from how the playoffs went last year. And I really wanted to put the Sixers in this game one way or another. But, I mean, Embiid has trouble making it past the Celtics every time he's been in the playoffs. And Harden, he hasn't gone too far in the playoffs himself. So I just want to see it first. No disrespect to what that duo has already done and how good they're going to be to close out this season here. But I want to see it first before I put them in that game.
Understandable. I can't argue with that about James Harden. I really can't. On the flip side, I'm picking Brooklyn and Philly. I think we're getting the exact chaotic East Finals that we want. I think Philly is the best.
They're going to be through the roof.
Oh my god, bro. Oh my god, it would be crazy. I think Philly. Amara, you mentioned it earlier with the starting lineup that they can put out now. Like with it's Harden. They could have a lineup of Harden, Maxey, Tybal, Tobias, and Joel. That's the best starting lineup, honestly, in the NBA, in my opinion. Sans maybe the Suns with a healthy Chris Paul in that lineup. That's just deadly everywhere. I think that they're going to be able to. I just think that they're almost matchup proof because the biggest matchup disadvantage in the Eastern Conference is going to be Joel Embiid against everybody else with how much Harden it seems to be opening up the floor for them. And I'm picking Brooklyn. I'm picking Brooklyn to win just because I trust Kevin Durant. I think that this man's on a mission. He lost by his big toe last year. Literally his big toe. So I think that I trust Kevin Durant. That's all it really comes down to. Like I don't have any other basketball take. Even basketball wise, I would never pick Brooklyn on paper over Philly, but that's just what it's going to come down to for me. All right, Amari, thank you for joining the show. We appreciate it. It was a great time as your first guest. Yes. Go and plug your shit, bro. I know you're out here grinding. So what are you up to? Where can the people find you?
Yeah, I'm trying to get this writing career off the ground, but you can follow me on Twitter. I should have put it in my name. I didn't even think about it. It's my first name _ M.
We're gonna put it on the we're gonna put it on the tweet too when we post this live, so you'll be good.
Yeah, it's my first name _ M17. I mean, I cover pretty much all sports. I run my own blog. I write about whatever I want to, and I also co-host a podcast for the Cleveland Indians, but not for the Cleveland Indians. It's covering the Cleveland Indians, or I guess Cleveland Guardians now. Excuse me. But I mean, we're obviously on hiatus right now with the off season and the lockout. We'll probably have a new episode coming soon covering the lockout. But I mean, follow me on Twitter. I talk about a lot of stuff. I talk about any and every sport, even soccer and MMA if you like that kind of stuff. So so I would love to come back on if you guys need another guest. Hit me up anytime.
Welcome anytime, man.
Bro. It was a blast. Yeah.
All right, guys, you heard him. Go follow Mari and and keep up with the NBA. We'll see you next time.
Yes, sir. Make sure to follow us at Happy Hour Hoops 1. Subscribe wherever you get your podcast. I'm not telling you the places anymore. We've been through this last week. Y'all know where you listen to podcasts. Just